Min-jae Kim stood frozen in his penthouse living room at 3 in the morning, doing something he'd never done in his entire 45 years of existence. Holding a baby, 6 months old, weighing barely 6 kilograms, with tiny fingers wrapped around his index finger and her head resting against his chest. Clara Jones had finally stopped crying after what felt like an eternity, her small body rising and falling with each breath against his expensive silk shirt. He was terrified to move, terrified to breathe too deeply, terrified that any motion would shatter this impossible silence. His heart pounded harder than it did during any business negotiation, any territorial dispute, any moment where his life hung in the balance. This was different. This was a kind of fear he'd never known, a responsibility he'd spent 2 decades carefully avoiding. The warmth of the child against him felt foreign, almost accusatory, as if her innocence could somehow expose every dark corner of his soul. Just 2 hours ago, everything had been normal. He'd returned from a tense meeting with the Park family, a rival organization that had been testing boundaries for months. No violence, just words and veiled threats exchanged over expensive whiskey in a private room at the Lotus Club. That was how Min-jae operated, cold, calculated, always 3 steps ahead. He'd built his reputation not on brutality but on intelligence, on knowing things others didn't, on being untouchable through information rather than bloodshed. But when he'd walked through his front door at 1 in the morning, nothing was as it should be. Clara Jones, his housekeeper, was supposed to have left hours ago. Her car in the driveway had been his first warning. The second was the silence, broken only by a baby's desperate crying from somewhere inside. He'd found Clara collapsed on the marble floor of his kitchen, convulsing, foam at the corners of her mouth. His medical training, rudimentary but necessary in his line of work, kicked in immediately. He'd checked her pulse, tilted her head, called his private doctor while examining the teacup beside her on the counter. The smell had told him everything he needed to know. Wolfsbane extract, diluted just enough to incapacitate rather than kill immediately. A message, not a murder. At least not yet. Dr. Shin had arrived within 20 minutes, stabilizing Clara with the antidote Min-jae, kept in his secure medical cabinet. She'll need hospital treatment within 6 hours, the doctor had said, packing his equipment. But moving her now would be dangerous. She needs to metabolize more of the antidote first. Fine, Min-jae had replied, his mind already racing through the implications. Who had gotten to her? How? When? Then Dr. Shin had asked the question that changed everything. Who's watching the baby? Min-jae had stared at him blankly. In the chaos of saving Clara's life, he'd almost forgotten about Laura, still wailing in her portable crib in the corner of the living room, where Clara must have placed her before drinking the poison tea. Find someone, Min-jae had said. Dr. Shin had given him a look of profound disbelief. It's 3 in the morning, Mr. Kim. That child hasn't eaten in over 5 hours based on the bottle times I see here. She needs feeding, changing, and comfort. Now. I don't. Min-jae had started, but the doctor cut him off. Then learn. I'll be back in 6 hours to transport Clara. And with that, Dr. Shin had left, leaving Min-jae alone with an unconscious woman and a screaming infant. For 10 full minutes, Min-jae had stood over Laura's crib, hands in his pockets, watching her cry. Her face was red, scrunched up in distress, tiny fists waving in the air. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals, faced down men twice his size, restructured entire criminal networks. But this 6-kilogram human terrified him in ways nothing else ever had. Laura's cries had intensified, becoming hoarse, desperate. Something in Min-jae's chest had twisted painfully. She was hungry, scared, confused about why her mother wasn't responding. She was suffering, and he was standing there like a coward. He'd found bottles in Clara's bag, read the formula instructions 3 times, prepared one with shaking hands. But when he'd tried to feed Laura while she was still in the crib, she'd refused, turning her head away, crying even harder. The bottle had been the right temperature, the nipple the right type. What was he doing wrong? Frustration mounting. Min-jae had finally reached into the crib and lifted her out. She was so light, so fragile. He was certain he was holding her wrong. He tried to cradle her horizontally like he'd seen in movies, but she'd arched her back, fighting him, still screaming. In desperation, he'd shifted her upright against his shoulder, one hand supporting her head, the other her small back. And just like that, as if he'd discovered some secret code, Laura's cries had softened. Her body had relaxed against him, her face turning into the curve of his neck. Within seconds, her breathing had changed, deepened. She was falling asleep. On him. This child who didn't know him, who should have been terrified of this stranger, was choosing to trust him with the most vulnerable act possible, sleep. Min-jae had lowered himself carefully into his leather chair, the one he sat in when making the hardest decisions of his criminal empire. Now he sat there holding a baby, feeling her tiny heartbeat against his chest, her warm breath on his neck. Her hand had found his finger and wrapped around it with surprising strength, as if anchoring herself to him. Comment below. Have you ever been responsible for someone completely helpless? Like and subscribe to see how this ruthless boss's entire world is about to change. Something was breaking inside him, some carefully constructed wall he'd built brick by brick over 20 years. A memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. His own mother's arms around him, her heartbeat against his small ear, her voice humming a song he'd forgotten until this moment. He'd been 5 years old, and she'd been holding him exactly like this, making him feel safe in a world that had never been safe at all. Min-jae's phone buzzed on the side table, the vibration loud in the quiet room. He didn't dare reach for it, terrified any movement would wake Laura. Through the reflection in the dark window across from him, he could see the screen lighting up repeatedly. Messages from his lieutenant, Young-ho, about tonight's developments. His jaw tightened as understanding crashed over him like cold water. This wasn't random. Clara hadn't been poisoned by accident or mistaken identity. She'd been targeted specifically because she worked for him, because she was close to him, because hurting her would send him a message. The Park family wasn't playing by the old rules anymore. They were innovating, and their innovation was cruelty of a different kind. The phone finally stopped buzzing. In the silence that followed, Min-jae could hear Clara's labored breathing from the guest room where Dr. Shin had placed her. She was a single mother, 28 years old, who'd come to Seoul from Lagos 3 years ago to make a better life for herself and her daughter. She'd applied to work for him through an agency that vetted all his household staff with the same thoroughness he vetted his business associates. Clara had been perfect, discreet, efficient, asking no questions about the men who sometimes visited at odd hours or the security systems that were far more elaborate than any normal home required. She'd never brought Laura to work before. Min-jae had known the child existed only as a line item in his knowledge of Clara's life, filed away as irrelevant information. But something must have happened tonight. A babysitter cancellation, an emergency, that had forced Clara to bring her daughter with her. And that decision, that one unavoidable human moment of imperfection, had put them both in danger. Laura stirred slightly, making a small sound that stopped Min-jae's heart for a moment. But she didn't wake, just adjusted her position against him, her thumb finding its way to her mouth. He exhaled slowly, carefully, resuming his vigilance over her sleep. The sky outside began to shift from black to deep blue, the first hint of dawn approaching. Min-jae hadn't slept, hadn't moved except to breathe. His arm had gone numb an hour ago. His back ached from maintaining the perfect stillness, but he wouldn't shift position. Something about this moment felt sacred, important in a way he couldn't articulate. When Dr. Shin returned at 7 in the morning, he found Min-jae exactly where he'd left him 6 hours earlier. The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "I'll check on Clara," he said quietly, disappearing into the guest room. 10 minutes later, Clara's voice drifted out, weak but panicked. "Laura? Where's Laura? Oh God, where's my baby?" "Mrs. Jones, you need to stay calm," Dr. Shin's voice responded. "You've been poisoned. Your daughter is safe. I need to see her. I need." Clara's voice broke into sobs. Min-jae stood carefully, cradling Laura against his chest with both arms now, and walked to the guest room doorway. Clara was trying to sit up, tears streaming down her face, her dark skin ashen with shock and lingering toxin effects. When she saw him holding Laura, she froze. The tableau must have been absurd. Min-jae Kim, feared negotiator, orchestrator of half of Seoul's underground economy, standing in designer pajamas he'd never changed out of, holding a baby with the careful intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Clara's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally settled on something like wonder. "Mr. Kim, you held her? All night?" He nodded once, short and economical. "Dr. Shin said she needed care. You were unconscious." Clara's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these looked different. "I'm so sorry. I should never have brought her here. I should never have. Who did you see yesterday?" Min-jae interrupted, his voice quiet but commanding. "Anyone unusual? Anyone at all?" Clara wiped her eyes, trying to focus through the fog of fear and medication. "There was a man. He said he was from the gas company, needed to check the meter. He was very polite, professional. He offered me tea while he worked. I thought." She stopped, realization dawning on her face. "Oh God, the tea. That's when I started feeling strange." Min-jae walked to the side table in the guest room, pulled out his phone with one hand while keeping Laura secure with the other, and scrolled to a photo. He held it up for Clara to see. "This man." Clara's face went pale. "Yes, that's him." "Who is he?" "Someone who works for people who wanted to send me a message." Min-jae's voice was flat, emotionless, but his free hand had curled into a fist. "They wanted to hurt someone who couldn't fight back." "This is because of me," Clara whispered. "Because I work for you." This is because of me, Min-jae corrected. Because I exist. Because they thought they could use you to manipulate me. He paused, watching Laura sleep against his shoulder. They were right. But not in the way they expected. Clara struggled to sit up further, wincing. Mr. Kim, I'll quit. I'll take Laura and disappear. I'll go back to Lagos. No. The word came out harder than he intended, and Laura stirred. He softened his voice immediately. No. You'll stay here where security can protect you. This is my responsibility to fix, not yours to run from. Dr. Shin cleared his throat. Clara needs hospital treatment within the hour. The antidote has done its work, but she needs proper monitoring and 4 fluids. I've arranged for a private facility, very discreet. If you're invested in what happens next, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling us. What would you do if your job put your child in danger? This story is about to get even more intense. Min-jae nodded. I'll arrange transport. Clara, you'll have a security detail at the hospital. No one gets near you without my approval. My baby, Clara started, stays with me until you're released, Min-jae said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. She's safe here. Clara's eyes widened. Mr. Kim, you can't. I mean, you don't have to. Taking care of a baby is. I managed last night, Min-jae said. He glanced down at Laura, still sleeping peacefully against him. I can manage until you're well. Dr. Shin packed his medical bag, carefully avoiding eye contact with either of them. The hospital transport will be here in 30 minutes. Clara, you'll need to stay for at least 48 hours for observation. The wolfsbane toxin can have delayed effects on the kidneys and liver. After they left, Min-jae found himself alone in his penthouse with a sleeping baby and a growing sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He'd built his position in Seoul's underground through careful neutrality, through being the person who knew everyone's secrets but never weaponized them unnecessarily. He brokered deals, mediated disputes, controlled information flow. Violence was inefficient, messy, unpredictable. He'd always prided himself on being above it. But the Park family had changed the game. They'd gone after Clara, a civilian, a mother, someone who had nothing to do with territory or profit or power. They'd poisoned her in his home, treating her life as nothing more than a message to be delivered. And for what? To pressure him into giving up lucrative shipping route information? To make him look weak? His phone buzzed again. This time he carefully shifted Laura to one arm, marveling at how natural the motion felt after just a few hours, and checked the screen. Young-ho had sent a detailed report. The message was clear. Park's enforcer, Dae-young, had been spotted near 3 other locations in the past month. A mistress belonging to the Choi family boss had been hospitalized with mysterious food poisoning. The teenage son of a Lee family accountant had been run off the road, surviving but traumatized. An elderly woman who cleaned for the Yoon family had been mugged in broad daylight, badly beaten. Park wasn't just targeting Min-jae. He was systematically terrorizing the innocent people connected to every major family in Seoul. The pattern was brilliant in its cruelty. Avoid direct confrontation with other bosses, but make their loved ones and employees pay the price. Create fear without triggering all-out war. Force everyone into submission through the safety of those they couldn't protect. Min-jae read through the report twice, his mind working through the implications. The other families probably hadn't connected the dots yet, each thinking their incident was isolated bad luck or personal grudge. But Min-jae saw the pattern, saw Park's strategy unfolding like a chess game where innocent people were pawns. Laura began to stir, her face scrunching up in that way he'd already learned meant she was about to cry. He quickly moved to the kitchen, awkwardly preparing another bottle one-handed while keeping her secure against his shoulder. The motion felt less foreign now, almost instinctive. She was waking up in a strange place without her mother, and he needed to be ready. Her eyes opened, dark brown, confused, searching. For a moment Min-jae thought she would scream, terrified of this stranger holding her. But Laura just stared at him, her small face serious, as if trying to figure out who he was and whether she should be afraid. Your mother is safe, Min-jae told her quietly, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping his tone would comfort her. She's getting help. You're safe too. I promise. Laura's bottom lip trembled. Then, instead of crying, she reached up and grabbed his nose with her entire hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so purely innocent, that Min-jae felt something crack deeper in his chest, something that had been frozen for 2 decades. He tested the bottle temperature on his wrist the way Clara's instructions had shown, then offered it to Laura. This time she took it eagerly, her eyes never leaving his face as she drank. The trust in that gaze was staggering. She had no reason to trust him. She didn't know him, didn't understand what was happening, but she chose to believe he wouldn't hurt her. When had anyone last looked at him that way? When had anyone last trusted him without calculation, without agenda, without fear? The memory came flooding back with painful clarity. He'd been 5 years old, small for his age, hiding in a closet while men shouted in the next room. His mother's voice, calm but firm, telling them she didn't know where his father kept the money, that she was just a seamstress, that she had nothing to do with his business. The sound of furniture breaking. His mother's scream, cut short. Young Min-jae had pressed his hands over his mouth to keep from making any sound, just as his mother had taught him. If bad men ever come, she told him weeks before, you hide and stay quiet no matter what you hear. Promise me, Min-jae. Promise me you'll survive. He'd kept that promise. He'd stayed hidden for 3 hours until his father came home and found him still in the closet, silent, staring at nothing. His father had pulled him out, looked at his face, and said the words that had defined the next 20 years of his life. This is what happens when you love someone. They use it against you. They make you weak. Never love anything you're not willing to lose. His father had meant it as protection, as preparation for the life they lived. But Min-jae had internalized it differently. He decided never to love anything at all. No wife, no children, no close friendships. Only business associates, employees, contacts. People who served functions but never touched his heart. And it had worked. For 20 years, he'd been untouchable because he had nothing to lose. He'd become powerful because he couldn't be manipulated through emotional attachment. He'd survived because he'd killed that part of himself that could care. Are you seeing the pattern? Comment below what you think Min-jae should do next. And don't forget to like this video if you're hooked on this story. Until a 6-month-old baby had grabbed his finger in the middle of the night and chosen to fall asleep against his chest. Until Clara Jones had been poisoned in his kitchen for no reason except that she'd worked for him. Laura finished her bottle and immediately started fussing. Min-jae remembered Clara's instructions about burping. He shifted Laura to his shoulder, patting her back gently. After a moment, she let out a surprisingly loud burp for such a small person, and he found himself smiling despite everything. His phone rang. Young-ho's name flashed on the screen. Min-jae answered, keeping his voice low. Talk to me. Boss, I've got confirmation. It's definitely Park's operation. Dae-young has been using the same cover story, gas inspector, water meter reader, delivery person, to gain access to targets' homes. He's been methodical, spacing out the incidents to avoid detection. And boss. Young-ho paused. The other families don't know yet. They think these are random crimes. How long until they connect it? Min-jae asked, adjusting Laura who was starting to drift back to sleep. Could be weeks, could be never. Park's been smart about it. Different methods, different locations, different time frames. Without our intelligence network, there's no obvious pattern. Min-jae walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline. The morning sun was painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, Park was probably congratulating himself on his brilliant strategy. Somewhere out there, other innocent people were going about their lives, not knowing they were targets simply because of who they worked for or loved. Young-ho, I need you to compile complete dossiers on every incident. Times, dates, victims, methods, hospital reports, everything. I also need you to pull our surveillance footage from the past 6 months. Every major family's known associates, their patterns, their vulnerabilities. Boss, that's going to be extensive. What are you planning? Min-jae looked down at Laura, now sleeping peacefully against his shoulder again. Something I should have done years ago. Set up a meeting. All 5 family heads. Tomorrow night. Neutral ground. There was a long silence on the other end. Boss, that's unprecedented. The last time all 5 families met was 2019. I know. I was there. Min-jae's voice was firm. Make it happen. Tell them it's about mutual survival. They'll come. And Park? He's not going to like being called out. I'm counting on it. Make sure he knows this meeting is mandatory. And Young-ho? One more thing. I need complete surveillance packages on all 5 family heads. Everything we have. Young-ho's voice dropped. Boss, we don't use that information. That's always been your rule. We collect it for protection, but we never. I know what the rule was, Min-jae interrupted. Tomorrow, I'm changing it. Not to hurt anyone, but they need to see what's possible. They need to understand what power actually means. After hanging up, Min-jae spent the rest of the morning learning to be something he'd never been, a caretaker. He changed Laura's diaper with the clinical precision he applied to everything, following online tutorials on his tablet while she kicked her legs and made nonsensical baby sounds at him. He prepared bottles at the right temperature. He walked her around the apartment when she got fussy, discovering that she liked looking at the aquarium built into his wall and seemed soothed by the movement of the exotic fish. By afternoon, he developed a rhythm with her. Feed, burp, play, sleep. Simple, repetitive, strangely meditative. Every time she smiled at him, a gummy, innocent smile that lit up her entire face. He felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. At 3 in the afternoon, Young-ho arrived with the dossiers. He stopped dead in the doorway, staring at Min-jae who was sitting on the floor, Laura propped against his legs, dangling a set of keys that she seemed fascinated by. Don't say anything, Min-jae warned. Young-ho closed his mouth, then opened it again. Boss, I've worked for you for 12 years. I've never seen you sit on the floor. I didn't know you could sit on the floor. The keys have better visual angles from down here. She likes watching them move. Min-jae took the folders Young-ho was holding. Is everything here? Everything. All 5 families. Complete surveillance packages going back 3 years. Boss, are you sure about this? Once you show them we have this information, there's no going back. The balance of power shifts. Min-jae opened the first folder. Inside were photographs, schedules, routes, security details. Park's 8-year-old grandson at Seoul International School. His schedule, his driver's route, his after-school taekwondo class. The boy's favorite ice cream shop, where he stopped every Wednesday. Every vulnerability, documented with the thoroughness Min-jae applied to everything. He felt sick looking at it. Not because the information was wrong, but because of what it represented, the capacity to hurt a child to make a point. The exact thing Park was already doing to others. I'm sure, Min-jae said quietly. Laura grabbed his finger, pulling it toward her mouth. I've had this information for years and never used it, because I thought restraint made me civilized. But restraint only works if everyone agrees to it. Park's changed the rules. Now I'm going to show him what the rules could have been all along. Young-ho sat down in one of Min-jae's designer chairs, watching his boss play with a baby surrounded by folders full of ammunition. What changed, boss? Why now? Min-jae looked at Laura, who was now trying to eat his watch. She did. This child. Her mother was poisoned in my kitchen because Park thought I wouldn't care enough to retaliate. He thought wrong. Do you think Min-jae is making the right choice? Should he use the information or find another way? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to see how this confrontation unfolds. But you're not retaliating, Young-ho observed. You're calling a meeting. I'm doing something worse than retaliation, Min-jae said. I'm changing the game entirely. The next evening, Min-jae stood in the private room of the Jade Garden restaurant, the most neutral territory in Seoul. Laura was with Dr. Shin and a carefully vetted security team at a safe house. Separating from her had been harder than he'd anticipated. The meeting room was traditional Korean style, low tables, silk cushions, walls decorated with ancient calligraphy. 5 men sat around the table, each representing a different family, each wearing expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Park Jae-sung sat directly across from Min-jae, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit immaculate. He was 62, ruthless, and clearly annoyed at being summoned. This better be worth my time, Kim. I don't appreciate being ordered around like some subordinate. You'll find it educational, Min-jae replied calmly. He remained standing while the others sat, a deliberate choice. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I've called this meeting because we have a problem. One that affects all of us, whether you know it yet or not. Choi Min-soo, the eldest at 68, leaned forward. Get to the point. What problem? Min-jae pressed a button on the remote he was holding. A screen descended from the ceiling, and a projector hummed to life. The first image appeared, a hospital report. 3 weeks ago, your mistress was hospitalized with severe food poisoning. The doctor said it was bad seafood. Choi's face darkened. How do you know about that? Because it wasn't seafood, Min-jae continued, clicking to the next image. It was deliberate poisoning. Low-grade arsenic, administered over several days. He turned to Lee Sang-min. 2 months ago, your accountant's son was run off the road. Police said it was an accident, possibly drunk driving on the other party's part. Lee straightened. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting. I'm telling you it was intentional. The other driver was paid 50 million won and given a new identity. Click. Another image. Yoon, your cleaning lady was mugged and beaten. They took nothing from her purse. That wasn't a mugging. Yoon Taehyun's hands clenched into fists. Someone beat Mrs. Han? She's 73 years old. And 2 nights ago, Min-jae's voice hardened. My housekeeper was poisoned in my home. Her 6-month-old daughter was there. The child could have drunk from that cup just as easily. The room erupted. All 4 men started talking at once, demanding explanations, asking questions. Only Park remained silent, his expression carefully neutral, but Min-jae saw the slight tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture. Who? Choi demanded, slamming his hand on the table. Who did this? Min-jae let the chaos continue for a moment, then raised his hand. The room fell silent. He clicked the remote again. Dae-young's face filled the screen. Gas inspector uniform, fake ID badge, the same friendly smile he'd given Clara. This man, Park's enforcer, using various cover identities to gain access to your employees, your associates, your loved ones. Poisoning them, hurting them, terrorizing them. What? Min-jae turned to look directly at Park. To send messages. To create fear. To make all of us feel vulnerable without ever directly attacking us. Park's face remained impassive. These are serious accusations, Kim. I hope you have proof. I have surveillance footage, financial records, testimony from 3 victims who identified Dae-young from photographs, and a complete timeline of his movements that correspond exactly with each incident. Min-jae's voice was cold. I have proof that would hold up in any court, if we were the kind of people who used courts. Lee stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Park, is this true? Did you target my boy? He's 17 years old. Your boy's father handles your finances, Park said calmly. That makes him part of the business. Everyone in this room has made choices that put people around them at risk. Don't pretend otherwise. There's a difference, Min-jae cut in, between accepting that our work has risks and deliberately targeting people who have no part in it. Children, elderly cleaners, a baby. His voice dropped lower. That's not business, Park. That's terrorism. Yoon spoke up, his voice shaking with rage. Mrs. Han has worked for my family for 20 years. She doesn't know what I do. She thinks I run import-export. You broke her hip. She'll never walk the same again. Collateral damage, Park shrugged. If you want to run a clean business, get out of our world. Otherwise, accept that everyone connected to you is a potential pressure point. The room exploded again. Choi and Lee were shouting. Yoon looked ready to attack Park physically. Min-jae let it continue, watching Park's expression carefully. The man looked satisfied, even pleased with the chaos he'd created. Finally, Min-jae spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise. Gentlemen, sit down. Something in his tone made them comply. Min-jae clicked the remote again. This time, the screen split into 5 sections, each showing a different photograph. Park's grandson at school, Choi's daughter at university, laughing with friends, Lee's elderly mother at her care facility, Yoon's son at his wedding venue, trying on a tuxedo. And the 5th section showed someone Min-jae himself had been connected to once, years ago, a woman he'd carefully kept at distance, but who still existed in the periphery of his life. The room went completely silent. These photographs were taken within the last 48 hours, Min-jae said quietly. Each person's complete schedule, security details, routes, vulnerabilities. I have them all. I've had them for years. What's your breaking point? When does protection become threat? Comment below and hit that like button. This confrontation is about to reach its peak. Park's face had gone pale. What are you doing, Kim? Showing you what I've always been capable of. What I chose never to do. Min-jae walked slowly around the table, the remote still in his hand. Park's grandson Ji-woo, 8 years old. Seoul International School, grade 3. Takes taekwondo on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His driver picks him up at exactly 3:15, takes the same route home every day. Wednesday afternoons, they stop at the ice cream shop on Gangnam Boulevard. Strawberry flavor every single time. Park stood up, his chair falling backward. You wouldn't dare. Sit down, Min-jae said, his voice like ice. I'm not finished. Park didn't sit, but he didn't move forward either. The other family heads watched in stunned silence, their eyes moving between Min-jae and the screen. Choi, your daughter Hannah, 22 years old, graduate student at Yonsei University. She thinks you're a legitimate businessman. Lives in apartment 402 at the Meridian Complex. Walks to campus every morning at 7:30. Meets her boyfriend, a medical student named Kevin, every Friday night at the same cafe. She's planning to study abroad next year. Oxford. She got her acceptance letter last week. Choi's face had turned gray. How could you possibly? Lee, your mother, 81 years old, living at Sunshine Care Facility in room 208. She has dementia. She doesn't remember you most days, but every Sunday at 2 o'clock, you visit her anyway. You bring her favorite flowers, white chrysanthemums. You read to her from the same book of poems your father used to read. She may not remember, but you never miss a visit. Lee's hands were shaking. You've been watching my mother? I've been watching everyone, Min-jae said. That's my job. That's what I do. I know things. I document things. I prepare for contingencies. He clicked to another slide, showing more detailed information, phone numbers, email accounts, social security numbers, medical records. I could have destroyed every single one of you at any point over the last 3 years. I could have used your children, your parents, your loved ones as leverage 1,000 times over. Then why didn't you? Yoon asked quietly. Min-jae stopped walking and turned to face them all. Because having power and using power are 2 different things. Because I believe that in our world, there were still lines we didn't cross. Because I thought that even criminals could have codes, could have honor, could agree that some things were off limits. He looked directly at Park. I was wrong. You showed me that. When you poisoned Clara Jones, a woman who cleans houses for a living, who came to this country to build a better life for her daughter, you showed me that honor is dead. That codes mean nothing. That in your mind, everyone is a target. Park's jaw clenched. She works for you. That makes her part of your organization. She vacuums my floors. Min-jae's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger bleeding through his controlled exterior. She doesn't know what I do. She doesn't attend meetings. She doesn't handle money or information. She cleans and she leaves. And you poisoned her while her baby was in the next room. The image on the screen changed again, this time showing Laura. Min-jae had taken the photo that morning. Her smiling face, her tiny hand reaching toward the camera, pure innocence captured in a single frame. This is Clara's daughter, Laura, 6 months old. When I found Clara on my kitchen floor, Laura was screaming in her crib. She hadn't eaten in 5 hours. She was terrified, confused, didn't understand why her mother wasn't coming. Min-jae's voice dropped lower. I had never held a baby before that night. Did you know that, Park? In 45 years of existence, I had successfully avoided ever being responsible for another human life. He clicked the remote again. The screen went dark. But that night, I learned something. Laura didn't know who I was. She had no reason to trust me. But when I picked her up, when I held her, she stopped crying. She grabbed my finger and fell asleep against my chest. Do you understand what that means? The room was silent. No one moved. It means, Min-jae continued, that even in the worst moment of her young life, scared and hungry and alone, she chose to believe that someone would protect her. That's what innocence is. That's what we destroy when we target people like Clara. We destroy the belief that anyone is safe, that anyone can be trusted, that the world has any mercy left in it. He walked back to his position at the head of the table. I spent the last 24 hours taking care of that baby while her mother recovered in the hospital. I fed her, changed her, walked her around my apartment at 3 in the morning when she couldn't sleep. And every time she looked at me with those trusting eyes, I thought about what you did, Park. I thought about how easily she could have drunk from that cup instead of her mother. I thought about how your enforcer probably didn't even check if a child was present before he poisoned that tea. Park finally spoke, his voice tight. What do you want, Kim? You've made your point. You have information on all of us. You could hurt any of us at any time. Congratulations. You're the most powerful man in this room. No, Min-jae said quietly. You're still not understanding. I'm not showing you this information to threaten you. I'm showing you this to explain why I didn't use it, and why none of us should. He placed the remote on the table. I'm proposing a new code. Simple, clear, binding. No targeting civilians. No family members. No employees who aren't directly involved in operations. No children. No elderly. No one who didn't choose this life. Think about the innocent people affected by others' choices. Should there be lines even criminals don't cross? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Choi spoke first. And if someone breaks this code, then everyone else enforces it. United. No exceptions. Lee leaned forward, his expression cautious. You're asking us to police each other, to turn against our own if they violate this code. I'm asking you to choose what kind of men you want to be, Min-jae replied. We're criminals. We've all made choices that put us outside the law. But that doesn't mean we have to be monsters. Park has shown us what happens when there are no boundaries. Everyone lives in fear. Everyone's loved ones become targets. And eventually, this entire system collapses into chaos. You nodded slowly. Mrs. Han didn't deserve what happened to her. Neither did any of the others. But how do we enforce this? Choi asked. What's to stop someone from violating the code and denying it? Min-jae gestured to the dark screen behind him. I have information on everyone in this room, on everyone in this city who matters. I see everything. If someone breaks the code, I'll know. And I'll present the evidence to all of you. Then we decide together what happens. Park laughed bitterly. So you want to be judge and jury over all of us? You want us to give you that power? I already have that power, Min-jae said. I've had it for years. What I'm offering now is transparency. A system. Rules that apply to everyone equally, including me. If I violate the code, you have the same right to enforce it against me. He picked up the remote again and clicked one final time. The screen showed a document, a formal code, typed and detailed, with spaces for signatures at the bottom. No targeting civilians. No using family members as leverage. No harming employees who aren't directly involved in operations. No involving children under any circumstances. Anyone who violates these rules faces united response from all families. The room fell silent as each man read the words on the screen. Min-jae watched their faces, seeing the calculation behind their eyes. They were weighing risks, considering angles, trying to find the trap. Finally, Park spoke. And if I refuse? If I walk out of here right now and continue doing exactly what I've been doing? Min-jae met his eyes steadily. Then every family in this room will know exactly where your grandson goes to school. They'll know his schedule, his route, his vulnerabilities. And they'll know that you believe those things are legitimate targets. You'll have set the precedent that children are fair game in our world. Park's face flushed red. You're threatening my grandson? No, Min-jae said calmly. I'm explaining consequences. You opened this door, Park. You decided that innocent people were acceptable casualties. I'm simply showing you what that world looks like when everyone plays by your rules. Is that really the world you want Jiwoo to grow up in? One where his grandfather's enemies might poison his ice cream on a Wednesday afternoon. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Park stared at Min-jae, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Finally, he looked down. You've made your point, Park said quietly. Have I? Min-jae pressed. Because I need to hear you say it. I need everyone in this room to hear you acknowledge what you've done and commit to stopping. Park's jaw worked for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was strained. I authorized the operations. I thought it was strategic. A way to apply pressure without direct confrontation. I didn't consider. He stopped, struggled, then continued. I didn't consider that I was creating a standard that could be used against my own family. That's the problem with erasing boundaries, Min-jae said. Eventually, there are no boundaries for anyone. Choi cleared his throat. I'll sign your code, Kim. Mrs. Han's broken hip taught me that I've been too comfortable thinking my legitimate businesses kept my employees safe. They don't. Not if we don't all agree to protect them. I'll sign too, Lee said. My son is 17. He didn't choose his father's profession. Neither did Hannah, or Jiwoo, or any of the others. This needs to end. You nodded. Agreed. All eyes turned to Park. The older man sat motionless for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I'll sign. But Kim, you understand what you're creating here? You're making yourself the arbiter of our entire world. That's a dangerous position. I know, Min-jae said. But someone has to be. And I'm the only one in this room who's proven I can have power without abusing it. He paused. Until 2 nights ago, I'd never used any of the information I've collected. I could have destroyed all of you years ago. I didn't, because I believed restraint was strength. I still believe that. This code just makes it official. The signing took 15 minutes. Each man approached the table, read the document carefully, and signed his name. When Park signed last, his hand shook slightly, but his signature was firm. As the meeting broke up and the family heads filed out, Park stopped beside Min-jae. That baby really changed you, didn't it? Min-jae thought about Laura's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, her trusting eyes, her innocent smile. She reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That some things are worth protecting. That power without purpose is just destruction. Park studied him for a moment. I hope you're right about this, Kim. For all our sakes. Then he left. Min-jae stood alone in the empty room, looking at the signed document. His phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Shin with a photo. Laura, awake and smiling, reaching for the camera. Clara was in the background, still pale, but smiling too, finally released from the hospital. He felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Not the crack that had been growing, but something else. Something that felt almost like hope. 3 months later, Min-jae sat in his penthouse at 7 in the evening, Laura on his lap. She was 9 months old now, babbling nonsense sounds, and trying to grab his watch. Clara was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, having fully recovered and returned to work with a security detail that made her laugh every time she saw it. Mr. Kim, you really didn't have to do all this, she'd said when he'd informed her about the new security measures and the nursing school tuition he'd paid. Yes, he'd replied simply. I did. Now Laura pushed herself up on his lap, wobbling slightly, her chubby legs trying to support her weight. She'd been practicing walking for days, always falling after 1 or 2 steps. But tonight, something was different. She looked at Min-jae with determination, pushed off his lap, and took 1 step. Then another. Then a third. She was walking toward him. Min-jae caught her as she stumbled forward, lifting her up, feeling her delighted laughter against his chest. Clara appeared in the doorway, her hands flying to her mouth. Did she just? She walked, Min-jae confirmed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. 3 steps. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Her first steps. And she took them to you. Later that night, after Clara and Laura had gone home with their security escort, Min-jae received reports from Young-ho. The code was holding. No incidents in 3 months. The other families had started implementing their own versions of civilian protection, creating buffers between their work and innocent lives. Park's grandson had changed ice cream shops, but that was the only noticeable difference in anyone's routine. The old man had been quiet, compliant, but Min-jae knew to stay vigilant. Some men changed. Others just waited. His phone rang. Dr. Shin. Thought you'd want to know. Clara passed her first semester exams. Top of her class. Min-jae smiled. Thank you for telling me. After hanging up, he walked to the window, looking out over Seoul's glittering lights. Somewhere in this city, Laura was sleeping safely in her crib. Clara was probably studying for next semester. Innocent people were going about their lives, not knowing how close they'd come to being casualties of a war they never signed up for. He thought about his mother, about that 5-year-old boy hiding in a closet, about 20 years of building walls to protect himself from ever feeling that helpless again. Those walls had made him powerful, but they'd also made him empty. Laura had knocked down those walls in a single night, with nothing but trust and tiny fingers wrapped around his hand. His father had been wrong. Love wasn't weakness. It was the only thing that made power mean anything at all. Min-jae turned away from the window and sat down at his desk. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But now, when he made decisions about territory and profit and strategy, he thought about a baby who'd chosen to trust him. He thought about a mother who'd survived poison mint as a message. He thought about all the Clara Jones and Loris in the world who deserve to be safe from men like him. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling us, what does true power mean to you? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because sometimes, the smallest person in the room teaches the biggest lesson. The story of Min-jae Kim, Clara Jones, and little Laura reminds us that strength isn't about what you're willing to destroy. It's about what you choose to protect. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that will change how you see the world.